Hello, hi. I'm going to go through the graphs that we made today during our lecture, and we're reproducing some graphs, but that gives us an opportunity to know and recognize how we can do a bunch of stuff. I'll update these graphs. First one I have is meat production. In class, we just went over 3, but for this video, I'll go for all 4 that we completed. This is data from Our World in Data. It shows the amount of meat production 2021 of a few different countries. Because you're comparing from some countries to the other, it is most appropriate to use a bar graph like this. I'm going to pick the data. I'll select the data. Let's see if that's everything. I'll pick this data, insert, and then I'll come over here. You can do recommended charts. That's a quick way to pick up the one you want. If you're not sure, it gives you a bit of a description with each of these. If you notice, like right about here, there's something of a description that with each one of these as to why you might want to pick that graph or you may not want to pick that graph. You can also just come in here and pick the 2D charts. And I'll just do that because I know it's going to be this column chart. Now that I have the chart, I'm going to size it to be about the same as this other one. So I'll put it next to it and I'll just grab these dots and that moves it. So okay, now I've got the area the same. I'm going to start doing some formatting. For example, let's see, format chart area. I'm going to give it a solid border, white line. That way, when I paste it into PowerPoint or into a Word document, I don't have this extra black line around the edge. Maybe if you like the black line and it helps for whatever you're doing, go for it. But I want these bars to be, oh yeah, I should update something. So I click on this data. If I click anywhere in this data, you'll notice that I have these little dots. I'll grab my annotation thing. When I do that, it unselects them. So I have these little dots around each of the bars. That means that they are selected. And when I do that, if I go up to the formula bar up here, I can start editing things. I'm going to I can put the title. If I only have one series selected, in here, I can put some title that I want. And I'll do that. Within quotation marks, I'll put meat production 2021. This is all within quotation marks. So it works. And that will update the title. In between, after the first comma, before the second comma, I'm going to select the x-axis. And I'll show you a little trick. There's only, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's only a few rows that we're talking about, but if you have a lot of rows, this can be very difficult. So I'll make some partial selection, and I can come back here and edit it because I want this everywhere from 2 to 8. So I'll edit what I have. So now it says A2 to A8, so it matches this thing over here. And when I have that in there, all the countries' names now show up. That's one of the things I wanted to update this. I also want to change the gap width. And I selected, if I click on this data series, I go to where it says format data point. Let's see, it's not letting me draw. Annotate. Okay, over here, format data point, and I want the one that looks like bars. And I will go to gap width. There are 3 ways I can adjust gap width. One of them is to click on this little thing. If I want to go down to, like, say, for example, 20%, it's going to take a lot of clicks. I can also grab this little bar and move it over. And that's like right there. The other thing is if I put a cursor in to the gap width, I can put some value, whatever value I want in there. Great. Now I have the gap width. And we rename the title. Let's add some data labels. Actually, let's change the font. Or did we do that already? I'm going to click on, I've got these dots along the whole south side of the plot area. And we want this to be Arial narrow size 11 font. There you have it. And let's add some is add a vertical title. I'll go to chart design, which is right up here. Once I click on chart design, I want to do add chart element. And the chart element I'm adding here is the axis title, primary vertical axis title. We have these in terms of 10,000 tons of meat production. If you have the data, so this data came to me with these huge numbers like that, that can work for the y-axis, but oftentimes it might make more sense to make it smaller. These are in 10,000. Actually, it might even look a little nicer if I put an extra, make this, I scale this even more. Sure, if you do that, then make sure you have this labeled appropriately. Hundreds of thousand tons of meat production, or whatever it is you put in there. Because I'm mostly doing this just to show this to you. So I think for the class submission, it was for 10,000. That will match this graph. But I just wanted to show you how to do this stuff. Okay, let's go back to editing this. I'm going to take off these grid lines. If I decide I want the grid lines again, I'll go back up to chart design, add chart element, and that's where the grid lines are. Oh, let's change the axis on here. This axis, we'll move it to under axis options. That is over here on the right-hand side. I'm going to make this the maximum. I want the minimum to be 0, which is great. I can either leave it there. This one, I'll change it to that value. That'll adjust this chart to be a little more consistent with the other one. I'm going to click on the charts over here. If I right click, add data labels. I've got these data labels. The numbers are kind of funny because they're a whole bunch of decimals. I can either leave it like that and format them. If I click on the data labels themselves, if I right click, go down to format data labels, I'll get this thing over to the right. I can change the number to however I want it. That's one way to do it. The other way, you change the data itself. If you haven't updated the formats of the data, if I come in here, right click, format cells, I'm going to say it's a number with 1 decimal. Now, just everything else updates with that. If I'm going to click on these data labels, and I'll tell it to go inside of the base. That's right here. And I'm going to change the color on these. If I click on it once, everything's selected. Oh, I think I know a reason why. I'm going to make this here. Because Tonga, with the amount of meat production Tonga has, it'll make more sense to have tens of thousands. Otherwise, it looks like they're producing 0, but that's not really what they're doing. Oh, I need to update this to the scale axis of 450. So we have axis of 450, and then here I want to format just the axis. I'll go to number, and I want 0 decimal places because I'm only formatting the axis. The data labels are going to retain what they have. If I click the data labels one time, all the data labels are selected. If I click it a second time, I can come back in here, come up here and change. And I can change the font color to white. And I'll do that for all of these that are within the bars. This one's a little bit low, so I'm going to make it a little bit taller so it's number 6 out or above. That way. And then the other thing is I'm going to change these. If I clicked on the data series, so you'll see little dots come up right over here on each of the 4 corners for each of these. That means I have them all selected. And then I'll come over here to where this paint bucket is. Let's see, I'm going to stop drawing so I can make the changes. I click on the graph, not just one, I want all of them. Click on the bucket, and I'm going to make them black. Oh, that is the border. That's nice. I want the fill. Let's make the fill black. There we go. It looks pretty close. Oh, I still need to add the data source. I'm going to come to this data source. I'm going to copy this. So Control C caches it. And then I'll make this a little bit smaller. I want to give myself some room. I'll come up to Insert. And if I inside, so here's where Insert is. And then I want to click on Text Box. I'll click on the text box and I'll put that somewhere. Now that I have a text box, I can paste that in there. And we want the data source to be Arial narrow size 8 and make it indent. And I want it all the way over to the right. So I'll do a right justification. And then I can fit this over here. Now that I have that placed where I want to be, I'll click on the plot area, drag this back down. Oh, maybe a little higher. And voila, we have this graph right where it needs to be. So there's some reproduction. Let's take a look at car sales. We have car sales in the US. Now I have this, the data came to me like this, and it came from the census. It has retail number of US car sales for, I forgot whichever year that was, but that's where this data came from. March is number 1. And it seemed to me make sense to have these on here. These are hundreds of thousands of cars. Oh, I probably should have added one more data label because that's what these are. But rather than having a big long number on the left, I divided it by 100,000. And so I'm going to, but X is on the first, Y is on the second. So I'll select this data like this, and then I'll come back in and change it. I click on Insert, and I'm going to click on, I'll click on Recommended Charts. If I find a chart I like, at least a starting point, I can work with that. This looks pretty good for a starting point. Now I have a graph. I'm going to resize it. I'll line it up next to this other one. That'll give me the opportunity to give it the size that I need. There we go. I'm going to get rid of these lines. Click on the lines, hit the delete key, they go away. We want, let's see, I'm going to click on this. These are, oh, I guess I do have hundreds of thousands of US car sales in the chart title. So it's already labeled appropriately. It might be nice to put access title, but the information is there. 100,000 US car sales. We want this to be, oh, yeah, so we have those long names, but we want the shorter names. So I clicked on the data series. I'm kind of up here in editing because the long names are in column C, the short names are in column E. So where it says C, I'm going to replace that with an E. Oh, and I added an extra character or something. Oh, yeah. Now we have the short names. Let's go ahead and change the font size while the whole thing's selected. I'm going to change it to Arial narrow size 11. Looks like we have a data source. I'll put that on here. I'll copy the data source. And I'll come in here. I'll make this, give myself some room to work with. Come up to Insert, Text Box, just like we did with the other one. And I'll paste that in there. And I'll go ahead and change the size. We want this to be Arial narrow 8. I'll right justify, make it italic. Now I can squish that in there. Okay, we got that set up. It looks like the scale is a little bit different. So I'll change that. If I click on the left, on the X-axis, and I'm going to come over to the right, which is Format Access, and the bar, thing with the bars, let's give it a minimum of, let's see, 1.9, and then maximum, how about 2.3? That will track with what we have there. Underneath that, this has the units. The units is 1/20th. We'll make it to 1/10th. So 0.1 instead of 0.05. And that will give us Notice that updates where the axis is. Instead of being every half of those, now it's 0.23, 0.22. It looks like what we have over there on the left. I think the last thing we have left on here, oh, there's two more things. Let's change if I click on the paint bucket, I'm going to give it a solid line and make that solid line white so it's hidden. The other thing is I'll click on the data series and I will give it a color of black. And now we have a graph that looks just like the other one. Permit value. This is going to take a little bit more effort. Now, if I'm looking at this, let's select the data and make a graph. I'm going to select these 2 points, or I'll select the entire range of data, insert, and then this is going to be a scatter plot. I could go to recommended charts and it will ask for a scatter plot. That'll give me right there, or I can go right over here, click on it, same thing. There's my scatter plots, and I'm going to give it the same size. Okay, now that they're the same size, let's go ahead and do the font. Garamond 14. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these lines. I'll click on these lines. If you want these lines back, you can go up to chart design, add chart element. There's grid lines. You can put them in. With this one, we're going to have the chart title is Prince William Sound Salmon Drift Gilmet. And we're looking at two different things. There's a permit value and average earnings. And so I think it would, both of those are in terms of dollars. So it would make sense to have these be label those axes so we know which is which. So I'm going to go to chart design, which is right up here. And then I'll click on add chart element. Turn drawing off so I can actually do that. Add chart element, and we want to click axis title, primary horizontal, axis title, primary vertical. And that gives us some titles. So I'll select the title, and I want permit value for this one. And this one, I will want average earnings. Okay. Let's see, average earnings. The maximum average earnings that I have, 115. I didn't put this on here, but it might look a little better. If I did clean this up, let's make a maximum of 120,000. And I'll do 0 just so it stays. And this one, we're looking at permit value. So maximum we can put 225 if you want to make it a little more granular. Probably fine keeping it at 250. And then I will force this one to be 0, the minimum maximum levels. So now we can see where the spread is. There are, so if I click on these data points, if I click on the data series, you'll see the 4 dots, and it doesn't go over every single point, but it goes over a lot of them, more than one. That tells me I'm not looking at just one data point. I'll click on this bucket over here, and then I want to click on market. And the marker options, we'll use a built-in, and we can find the X if that's what we're doing. And then fill, let's make the color be black. Oh, not fill, no fill. We want the border to be black. Now we've got these black dots. We have, I guess, before it gets too far, I'm going to go ahead and add the text box. Source, Alaska Commercial Fisheries Entry Commission. And we want this to be a Garamond size 8, right justified. And then I can move it where it needs to be. Click on the box, drop this down. We do want to add a trend line in here. Oh, I think I need to, let me change the border of this. The border, a solid line, solid white line. There we go. And the last thing we need to do is a trend line and an associated formula. Now you'll notice these numbers are so big, 50,000, 100,000. It might make sense to do these in terms of tens of thousands, permit value, or tens of $1,000 permit value. For average earnings, it might make sense to put them in, same with tens of thousands as well. If you don't, it's probably okay. But it'll make the graph a little bit larger itself. Although if it makes more sense to your audience to keep the numbers that way, then do it that way. If I click on the data series, I clicked on one of these dots inside and a whole bunch of them popped up. So that means that I know that I have the whole series, not just one value. I'm going to add trend line. And when I click on that, I'll get a bunch of things over to the right. I can choose what kind of trend line I want. I'll keep it linear. Linear seems like it works good. Display equation on the chart. We'll pull this down. Now this equation has 1.688. I'm going to change this to be a number that's a little bit easier to read. I selected the graph itself after moving it over here. I'll click on these bars to the right, the number category, and I want the number category of number with 3 decimal. I'll put a 3 in there, hit enter. Now I've got the formula, looks just like the other one. But I still need to update this trend line. I click on the trend line and I'll come back over to the bucket, fill in line, and let's make this black in color. And it's got the dotted line. So I'm going to go to the dash type and make it more like a dash. That way they'll match a little closer. And now we have a beautiful graph that looks pretty close to the other one. I think we changed the x-axis, but otherwise everything, which looks better than the one on the left. But otherwise everything is pretty much the same. Lastly, we have millions of cell phone subscribers, 1985 to 2007. This came from a publication called Surgical Neurology, the April 2009 edition. Let's graph these out. I'm going to pick the data, insert, and I will do recommended charts. See if I can find one that looks, this one looks pretty good. I'll go with this line graph. Click OK. Now, what's tricky about these graphs, the line graphs, is it just looks at whatever your X value is. If you use a scatter plot, that'll force it to, it's like if you have missing data points, you want to make sure you use a scatter plot with connected lines. That way you can account for those the years of missing data that you have. That's one strategy to deal with that. So I'm going to make this chart. Okay, physically it's the same size. I'm going to change the chart title. Millions of US cell phone subscribers, 1985 to 2007. I'm going to change the entire font size to Garamond 14. Oh, wow, that's interesting. Okay. And we're starting to get closer, not quite there. I'm going to change this x-axis. We want 0 right there, and we want 250 for the max. Okay, that's closer. Oh, Garamond, I want 14. There we go. And I'll click on this plot area. I'll drag it up here. That way it's overlaid. I'm going to get rid of this line. I click on the line, click on delete. Well, actually, I'll go this other way. Chart design, add chart elements, grid lines. Let's see, what are all the grid line options? No line. There we go. Format major grid line. The x-axis looks like it could use a little bit of work. I'm going to click on the x-axis. right click, do format access. We've got these things that show up. One of them is, oh, let me click on this third one, the alignment. Now, when they're sideways, it can be hard to read. I'm going to put these custom angle of 0 degrees. And when I do that, now I've got them reading left to right like a book, which is what I wanted them to be. What's the font on this? That font looks good. Okay, now that I have these, but on the graph, it has every 5 years. This has every 2 years. So if I go back over here to the access options, I can have, oh, I want labels. That's where I want to find it. Specify interval, and I'll put every 5 years. I'll put a 5 under specify interval. Now these show up every 5 years, as opposed to every 2 years or whatever other number it wants. We're getting pretty close with this one. We want the border. I got the whole thing. We want a solid border that's white. And it looks like, oh, we want to add, let's add the data source. I'm going to move this up here, insert, and rather than putting the author in there, just putting the publication. Or something like this, that's okay because you can still find where this is. The important thing is when you leave a source is you want to leave breadcrumbs. Let's see, source, and this is the Surgical Neurology, April 2009 edition. And we want this to be Garamond size 9. I made mine italic to match the other one. Right justified. Drop this in the bottom corner. Pull this down here. Okay, that's a little too far. There we go. Now let's go ahead and update these. If I click on the blue line, the data series, I'm going to change this from blue line, blue color of blue to blind color black. I'll change the width to 5 from 2.25. Now it's wider. And under the compound type, I'll make it this hollow line. Now that'll match the other one. Okay, that's one thing. I'm going to add a trend line now. Add, if I right click the data series, click on add trend line. Now I've got this trend line that showed up. I want to format the trend lines a little bit. So the trend line has these dotted lines. I'm going to come back here, the formatting thing, the little bucket paint, and I'm going to make this black. And I'm going to change it to the dash, the short dash. So that's what we have over there. But let me go back to these 3 bars, trend line options, because linear, it may not be the best fit at the low years and the top years, the middle years, it doesn't work. I'm going to put that equation on the chart anyways, and the R squared. This equation says something about, well, there's a linear equation, R squared. It's a statistical thing. The closer to one that you have, the more closer of a fit you have on your regression or on your trend line. And so I am going to click on the trend line again. I've got the little dots at both ends of the trend line. I'm going to try different things. I could try exponential. That has, let's see, oh, a slightly better R squared, but it fits in the early years, not so much after the early years. How about a polynomial? Oh, that looks really good. That's almost 1. So we'll go with this polynomial function. And picking it solely on R squared is not the best thing to do as a statistician. For a quick and dirty thing, it might work out okay. And then you'd want to apply some more methods to validate that's really what you're going to pick. Although that you probably will pick this one anyways, given this data set. I'm going to come down here. So we want let's format this a little bit. It's italic, so I'll do that. I selected the formula that we have here, but we've got out to 4 decimals. I'm going to come back here, click on these bars, and I'll tell it I want a number with 3 decimals. And that should be, oh, let's see. That should take care of it. Okay, well, that brings us a little bit closer to where, oh, there we go. Gave us, oh, some of the numbers have 3 decimals, but generally this is what I usually have done to edit these. Oh, I wonder if I'm going to take off the R squared for just a second. Oh, maybe there's more than one trend line in here. Nope, there's just one. Okay, I'm going to display the equation on the chart. I'm going to make this numeric with 3. Okay. Oh, there we go. Now it's got 3. And then I'll go back and change this to a polynomial. Oh, there we go. I just needed to toggle back and forth a little bit. And now we have all of our graphs. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was useful.